You know that specific kind of end-of-the-month dread? You sit down, coffee in hand, trying to figure out if you actually made any money this month.
Oh, I know it.
You open one banking app, wait for the Face ID to fail, like twice, log in, write a number down on a sticky note, then you open a mutual fund app, wait for that to load, scroll past 3 banners trying to sell you insurance, find the NAV, write that down. It feels less like financial management and, I don't know, more like digital chores.
It's the fragmentation problem. We live in a world where our data is everywhere. It's scattered across 5 or 6 different institutions.
It's scattered, yeah.
But the actual insight, the simple answer to am I richer or poorer than I was 30 days ago is just, well, it's nowhere to be found.
Right. And usually the solution people offer is make a better spreadsheet. But today we're doing something a little different. We're looking at a stack of tutorials and code repositories from a site called Plus2Net that propose a pretty radical shift. They're basically saying, stop visiting the websites. Stop letting the apps dictate how you see your money. Build your own dashboard that pulls real-time mutual fund data automatically using Python.
It's a compelling proposition.
It is, but I have to be honest right off the bat. When I hear build your own dashboard with Python, my brain immediately goes to, okay, I need a computer science degree and like 6 months of free time. Is this actually accessible for someone who might just be, spreadsheet savvy?
That is the common fear, but the source material here is surprisingly grounded. We aren't building a massive software application.
Okay.
We are writing scripts, short, specific instructions that act as a personal assistant. It's moving from what I call passive consumption, where you take whatever interface the bank gives you,
right, their interface,
to active retrieval. You are building an API-first financial data architecture.
API-first financial data architecture. That sounds great, but let's strip the buzzwords. What are the actual tools we are unpacking today?
It really just boils down to 3 things. First, Python, which is the language we speak to the computer.
All right.
Second, a library called requests, which is how Python talks to the internet. And third, the MFAPI database.
MFI being the Association of Mutual Funds in India.
Correct. They are the source of truth. Every mutual fund house has to report their net asset value, their NAV, to AMFI every single day.
So we have the roadmap. We're going to look at how to fetch a single price, then how to scale that to a whole portfolio of funds, then how to visualize it so nobody wants to stare at a wall of text, and finally, the big one, calculating your actual net worth automatically.
It's a journey from, like, hello world to hello financial independence.
Okay, let's start at the beginning. Part 1, the gateway. The sources focus really heavily on this concept of an API. So for anyone who's maybe not familiar with this, how is hitting an API different from just, visiting the MFI website and copying the number?
Think of a website like a sit-down restaurant. You walk in, you sit at a table, you look at a menu with pictures, there's music playing, maybe some ads on the table. It's designed for a human experience.
Right.
If you just want a burger, there's a lot of overhead.
Lots of waiting around.
Right. An API is the drive-through window. Or even better, it's the kitchen's back door. You don't care about the decor or the music. You just pass a specific note to the chef that says, give me the price for Fund X. And the chef hands you exactly that data. Nothing else.
No ads, no layout. Just the answer.
Just the answer.
And in this case, the kitchen is stocked by AMFI.
Yes. And the way we pass that note is through a URL. The tutorial highlights a very specific address. https://api.mfipi.nmf, followed by a scheme code.
That scheme code is just the unique ID for the fund, right? Like a social security.
Exactly. It's like a social security number for the mutual fund.
Got it. Okay.
But here is the critical part that the source emphasizes. You end the URL with latest.
Why is that specific keyword so important? What happens if I leave it off?
If you leave off latest, the API thinks you want the encyclopedia. It will send you the entire history of that fund, every daily price since the fund launched maybe 10 or 20 years ago.
Whoa.
That's a massive amount of data.
Which would slow everything down.
Ideally, you want speed. By adding latest, you are telling the API, I don't need the history lesson, just tell me what it closed at tonight. It reduces the payload from megabytes to bytes.
Okay, so we send this request, the chef hands us the data. Now, since we aren't using a web browser, what does that data even look like? It's not a web page.
No, it's JSON. JSON. If you've never seen it, imagine a text file that looks a bit like a Victionary. It uses curly braces. Inside, it has pairs of information. It will say scheme name, HDFC top 100, and then NAV 540.5.
It's stark. It's just raw information.
It is. It's data stripped of dignity. But that's what makes it so easy for Python to read. The script in part 1 is, it's barely 15 lines. It imports requests, sends that URL, grabs the JSON, and then just picks out 3 things: the name, the price, the NAV, and the date.
The date matters because AMFI updates usually happen around 9:00 p.m. IST, right? You want to confirm you're seeing today's close, not yesterday's.
Precisely. And the output the script generates is just a clean text line on your screen. Fund name price date.
Which is great. It works. But I don't know anyone who invests in just one mutual fund.
That's the hello world problem. It proves the concept, but it doesn't solve the real life problem.
Right, because my portfolio is a mess. I've got a flexi-cap, some blue chips, maybe a debt fund. If I have to write a separate script for every single fund, I'm back to manual drudgery. So how does part 2 of the source material handle the scaling up?
We have to change our container. In part 1, we held a single fund code in a variable. In part 2, the tutorial introduces a list of dictionaries.
Okay, list of dictionaries. That sounds like we're back in computer science class. Give me the real-world analogy.
Think of it like a digital Rolodex or a stack of index cards. You create a list. That's your stack.
Right.
On each card, that's the dictionary, you write down 2 things: the scheme code, the ID, and the scheme name, what you want to call it.
So I can label it my retirement fund instead of the official super long banking name.
Exactly. You stack these cards up in your code: ICICI, Prudential, SBI, Blue Chip, whatever you have.
And then the automation kicks in.
Then comes the for loop. This is the workhorse of programming. You tell Python, for every card in this stack, do the following. And it runs that same API request we did in part 1.
Oh, wow.
But it does it for the first cards and automatically moves to the second, then the third.
So it's like sending the waiter back to the kitchen 10 times in a row instantly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And instead of just printing the results and letting it scroll away, the script compiles it into a report. Now, I want to point out a specific detail in the code here that I really appreciated.
Right.
The use of F-strings for formatting.
I noticed that. It seemed like a lot of extra typing just to print text. Why did they bother?
Because mutual fund names are chaotic. Some are short, like Axis Blue Chip. Some are absurdly long, like Aditya Birla Sun Life Frontline Equity Fund Direct Plan Growth.
Right.
If you just print those in a list, your columns will be jagged. It looks messy.
And a messy dashboard makes you trust the numbers less.
Subconsciously, yes. The F string allows you to tell Python, allocate exactly 35 characters for the name column. If the name is longer, chop it off. If it's shorter, add spaces.
So the output looks like a professional bank statement. Perfectly aligned columns.
It separates the hobbyist script from a professional tool.
Okay, so now we have a table. We know the current prices. But a number in isolation is, well, it's dangerous. Seeing that a fund is at 450 rupees doesn't tell me if it's crashing or soaring.
Right.
We need context.
Context is everything. You need the trajectory.
This brings us to part 3. Visualization. The sources introduce Matplotlib, which I know is the big daddy of Python plotting libraries.
Yeah.
But this is where the tutorial threw a curveball that I think would trip up a lot of beginners.
The reverse chronological trap?
Walk us through this. We remove latest from the URL to get the history right.
Correct. When you ask for the history, the API sends you a list of every price for the last, say, 60 days. But, and this is huge, it sends the data with the newest date at the top. Index 0 is today, index 1 is yesterday.
Okay, so if I just took that list and told the computer, plot this from left to right.
You would be traveling back in time. The left side of your graph would be today, and the right side would be 2 months ago. The line would go backwards.
That would look completely broken, so we have to flip the data.
You have to flip it. But it's not just about flipping one list. You have a list of dates and a list of prices. You have to make sure that when you flip them, the price for January 1st stays attached to January 1st.
If they get out of sync, the graph is lying to you.
Exactly. The source code uses a really elegant Python function called zip. Imagine a zipper on a jacket. And locks the teeth on the left side, the dates, to the teeth on the right's, the prices.
Okay.
Once they are zipped together into pairs, then you sort them.
And since we want the graph to go forward in time, we sort by date, oldest to newest.
Right. Then you unzip them back into 2 lists and feed them to Matplotlib. It sounds complicated, but in code, it's only about 3 lines. It ensures your graph tells the true story of the trend.
There was one other gotcha in the visualization section regarding the dates themselves. The API sends dates as text, right? Just a string of characters.
15/01/2025. To the computer, that's just a word. It doesn't know January comes before February. It just sees letters.
So if you put that on a graph?
The axis spacing would be a mess. Matplotlib needs to know these are moments in time. So the script parses that text into a Python datetime object.
Ah, okay.
Once you do that, the graph becomes smart. It knows how to space the days. It knows how to rotate the labels so they don't overlap. You get that professional look with grid lines and markers.
So now we have the price, and we have the pretty chart showing the trend. But we are still missing the most important number. The number that determines if I can retire or if I need to work until I'm 90.
The net worth.
Part 4. Portfolio valuation. This seems like it should be simple math, but implementing it automatically is the holy grail.
It's the so what of the entire project. The formula is basic. Current NAV multiplied by the number of units you hold.
But the API doesn't know how many units I own. AMFI doesn't know my portfolio.
Nor should they. That's private data. So we have to go back to our Rolodex, that list of dictionaries from part 2.
Right.
We need to add a new field to each card. We had scheme code and name. Now we add units.
So I manually input. I own 500 units of Fund A and 120 units of Fund B.
Yes. You hard code that into your script because that doesn't change daily.
And the loop gets an upgrade.
The loop gets smarter. It fetches the live NAV from the API, immediately multiplies it by the units you listed, and calculates the value for that specific fund.
Okay.
But then, and this is the key, it adds that value to a running tally.
A grand total variable.
Exactly. It starts at 0. After Fund A, it adds 50,000. After Fund B, it adds another 20,000. By the time the loop finishes, you have one single number representing your entire portfolio's current market value.
And the source code even formats it with commas and the repeat symbol so it looks satisfying.
It's the psychological payoff.
Now, I want to pause on something very technical but fascinating that appeared in the Part 4 source code. It's a term called exponential backoff. It sounds like a sci-fi weapon, but the tutorial made a big deal about it. Why?
This is what separates a script that crashes from a script that works. When you are looping through 10 or 20 funds, you are hitting the AMFI server 20 times in just a few seconds.
And sometimes servers hiccup, or my internet blips.
Exactly. If you have no error handling, the first time a request fails, your whole script just crashes. You get a red error message and you get no data.
Frustrating.
Exponential backoff is a strategy for resilience. If the script tries to get a price and fails, it doesn't just give up, it pauses. It waits, say, 1 second and tries again.
And if it fails again?
It waits 2 seconds. If it fails again, 4 seconds. It doubles the wait time. That's the exponential part.
It's like polite knocking. Instead of banging on the door endlessly, you knock a little later.
Exactly. It prevents you from overwhelming the server, and it gives the network time to recover. It ensures that a temporary glitch doesn't ruin your entire report.
I love that. It's resilience built into code. So we've got this robust script. It calculates net worth, handles errors, makes charts. But here's the hurdle for me. I don't want to install Python, set up environments, manage libraries. It feels like a lot of friction.
The sources have a perfect solution for this. Google Colab.
That's the cloud tool, right?
Yes. Think of it as Google Docs, but for code. You don't install anything on your laptop. You open a browser tab, and Google gives you a machine in the cloud that already has Python, requests, and Matplotlib installed.
So I can just copy-paste the code from the tutorial into this browser tab and hit play.
You can actually just click the Open in Colab button on their GitHub repository. It's that seamless.
But, and I need to be the paranoid security guy for a second, we just talk about hard-coding our units into the script. That's my financial data. If I put that in the cloud, is it safe?
That is a crucial privacy note. When you open a Colab notebook, it's running in your private Google account instance. It's not public.
Okay.
However, you must ensure you are logged in and not saving this file to a public folder. The code logic is public, but your data, the units, lives in that specific instance of the script in your drive.
So treat it like a private spreadsheet. Don't share the link if you've typed your numbers in.
Exactly.
You know, stepping back, what I love about this is that it demystifies the tech of finance. We usually look at these banking dashboards as magic boxes, but really it's just a database in a loop.
It is. And by building it yourself, you gain agency. You stop asking, what does the app want to show me? And start asking, what do I want to see?
Maybe I want to see a graph comparing my debt funds to my equity funds specifically. I can build that.
You can. The data is yours. The tools are free.
Before you all rush off to open Google Colab and start feeling like a quantitative analyst, we have a small request. These deep dives take a lot of research to put together.
We really try to find the most actionable, high-quality sources for you.
So if you found this helpful, or if you just like the idea of firing your banking app, please hit the like button for this deep dive. It actually helps us a lot.
And don't forget to subscribe to this channel. We are planning more deep dives into automation and personal data.
And seriously, share this video with your friends, especially that one friend who is always complaining about their portfolio tracker. You know the one.
Save them from the spreadsheets.
So, final thought to send us off. We've automated mutual funds. What does this trigger in your mind for what's next?
It changes your worldview. Once you realize you can fetch a mutual fund price with a single line of code, you start looking at everything differently. You start wondering, can I pull my electricity usage data? Can I pull local weather data to automate my sprinklers? Can I track the price of used cars?
The world isn't just a physical place anymore. It's a collection of APIs waiting for you to ask the right questions.
You just have to learn how to order from the menu.
I love that. The world is your database.
Thanks for listening, everyone. See you next time.